going live from the Women Inspiring Network for IIT. And today our topic is fashion, tech, and sustainability. Women Inspiring Network has taken shape in the last 4 months, and we are very, very happy for the work which we've done. It has kept me inspired. In July, we had the sustainability series. And of course, I've been talking to Bandana for quite some time, and we're really glad to partner with IIT in this initiative to discussion fashion, tech, and sustainability. And of course, some new thoughts on how, now it's more than important than ever for fashion to digitalize itself, look at sustainability. In June and July, we've done a filmmaking series with noted filmmakers, a censor board personality, where we partnered with Inox and Businessworld, and we had a 10 million reach on social media. We've got 100 positive voices of women on our platform, what kept them positive during lockdown. We, of course, did a webinar for them, 70 voices in the first phase of lockdown. And next in the pipeline, we have Winning Minds, which we are going to start next week, talking about women authors in India and internationally. So now coming back to our topic, BandanaTewari has been a former fashion features director at Vogue and now a sustainability activist. And I have known Bandana when she was in Vogue, and we were just discussing about her life in Bali, and probably she will tell us a bit more about that. And just to introduce you, Adhiraj Singh, he's a 3D motion designer and a visual artist. And I know he's created something really, really exciting, fashion campaigns using CGI. And he's even given it a name called Rajiv. So of course, I want to know much more about it. So he founded Lota Designs. Unfortunately, Roma, who was going to be our third panelist, she's had a family emergency and she could not join us. But of course, we'll get a video recording from her and share with you all shortly about her thoughts. So Bandana, quickly tell me a bit about your journey, and of course, tell us where the fashion world is moving, especially in the technology space.
Hi, everyone. Good evening from Bali. I moved here about 4 years back from Bombay. I also resigned from Vogue after 13 years of a great, fun life, very thrilling, and with all the opportunities you can well imagine. But coming to Bali was a big mind shift, apart from a lifestyle shift, and moving into being a sustainability champion, activist, thinking about environmental issues, the kind of wastage that comes from fashion, how we can harness technology to have cleaner systems, streamlined systems in a very lucrative trillions of dollars of industry of fashion that became predominant in my journey professionally and personally. I think the best thing for me that happened was what I did professionally became very personal when I came to Bali. So being a sustainability activist in fashion is as much about my integrity, my personal beliefs and ideology, as it is about having a good life, earning a good wage, and living mindfully.
And Adhiraj, why don't you tell us a bit about your journey and how technology is playing a role in fashion in today's time?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Adhirat Singh. I'm an art director, digital designer, and 3D artist based in New Delhi, as to be mentioned. I'm also co-founder of Lota. I actually entered the fashion world very unexpectedly. I kind of went on a tour of mass manufacturing facilities, and that's where I kind of found this whole waste problem and the journey of Lota began. Before that, I used to work a lot into 3D forms and kind of making 3D worlds, just because it was nice to play God in a sense, to create visual communication. As a visual communication graduate, I wanted to be able to create anything I wanted or anything I could imagine, and the medium kind of spoke to me. And then when I got introduced to a problem of this waste, this huge issue that we have, it's amazing that we manufacture in our country, but it's also the fact that we're not dealing with the waste is a big problem. So Lota has kind of been that intersection of leveraging my abilities with 3D technology and my obsession for emerging technologies, and kind of adapting it to this problem specifically and creating a kind of new label that expresses itself to a new market and thinking for the future, not for kind of reinventing the whole system as opposed to just one part of it. And technology for us is very, very important. We started with the visual communication side of it, but we've slowly started moving into the design iteration part of it, where now our shirts are being designed by algorithms rather than just by people. So we're trying to go bit by bit into the process and see where we can ingest technology. Yeah.
So, digital transformation which has taken place in the fashion industry. Tell us, Bandana, if you've noticed things, how differently they're being done in Bali versus India, or your global experience, because I know that you're talking a lot on international forums. And if you can just throw some light on that.
Right. I wouldn't make it specific to Bali because it's such a tiny island, and
Sure.
it's very much like little regions within our own country in India that is handmade and handloom and made by hand. But if you look at a holistic picture of the fashion industry, the global fashion industry, particularly post and during COVID, rather, you see that the whole shift has gone to the digital sphere from offline shows, for instance. So, Shanghai Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, Paris Couture Week, even our own Indian Fashion Weeks have all transformed their businesses into an online space that goes across a variety of expressions, whether they are just like digital lookbooks, to branded videos, to designers doing podcasts, to what we are doing, Zoom conferences. I think the engagement period is quite intense because it really actually speaks volumes about the content now more than anything. So if you don't really have the gravitas to be able to stand face to face like this, we are in 3 different parts of the world, let's say, to be able to have something sensible to stay at a crucial time like COVID times, and to watch the industry suddenly morph because of the needs of the time is extraordinary. When I see what's happening in the fashion industry all over the world, I will take Helsinki Fashion Week as an example, which created the first 3D fashion week in the world. I mean, I was absolutely gobsmacked because here I am in the jungle in Bali, and now I have an avatar, a 3D avatar that's created because I'm a mentor for 2 designers, one who's sitting in Brussels and one in South Korea. And we are waiting for our headsets to arrive, and we are going to be in a virtual space of collaborating and cross-pollinating ideas. And I find that magical. I mean, Adhiraj, you deal with this every day, but for me, I'm telling you, I really feel I'm in an Avatar movie. I'm enjoying this shift very much. I don't think the fashion industry will ever be about only technology, because it's such a visceral touch and feel industry. We love things made with love, with creativity. We want to touch it. We want to smell it. We want to clothe our own bodies with it. I get it. But I think the excessiveness of the past years has to be addressed. And there is nothing better than technology that come to our aid.
Yes. And Adhiraj, please give us your thoughts on the same.
Absolutely. I think it was really nice to hear Bandana actually feel that through that experience, right? Like to actually see Helsinki Fashion Week create this digital form and kind of see herself in a digital world and what the possibilities of that bring. Because to me, that's something I've always kind of been interested in, just making stuff in this room. Like Dota was basically made in this room. And to see people now like really see themselves in it in a way and kind of embrace it. And I absolutely agree with Bandana. Like, it's not trying to get rid of the tangibility. It's not trying to get rid of like real models or anything, which is a question I've been asked a lot of times. It's just going to help a lot in the inefficiencies that exist currently and also offer an alternative potential solution. And it's about the symbiosis. It's about the harmony. And that's something, even because I have a label, I can kind of see every step of the supply chain and the visual communication and see consumers' reaction, see the data, because we are very data driven. Like, I really like data, and I see how people react to campaigns. I see all of that. And I feel like you have all this information and it's important to use it. So coming back to your question as to like how digital can kind of like what it actually means to be digital in fashion.
And you also collaborated with Roma during the Helsinki Fashion Week.
Yes.
So you can talk a bit about that.
Absolutely. So that was really interesting because she's a jewelry designer. She's a she is a focuses on the handmade aspect of thing. All her collections before were completely handmade, and she was really interested in what I did in terms of digital, and I was really interested in what it can bring to her. So that symbiosis, like even besides the final product, like the way we were working with each other. Even something as simple as she was like, oh, if I have this visual design in my head, I have these other designs that I want to experiment on, but it takes so much time, effort, labor, money to actually do that. But now if I can iterate 10 different solutions and come to the best one and then produce it, why not, right? Like it makes so much sense. And then doing that at scale all over this beautiful big planet of ours that's just wasting and wasting, it can really give a counter narrative to this kind of like wasteful supply. You know, fashion doesn't have to cost the world. Like I truly believe that. I think that like technology can offer this alternative way of viewing fashion, which is a little more holistic.
And for me, in all honesty, this is what interests me. I'm not a designer, I'm not the creator, but as an activist, to be able to see the symbiosis that you're talking about, where you're literally controlling your inventory, you're controlling your sampling. You can be as creative as you want without the kind of wastage that we've seen when we have to deal with real materials. Then you have to transport that materials. Then you have to collaborate over, hundreds of miles of distance. The carbon footprint of creativity itself was never accounted for. And so when you talk digital, then you really have a very valuable, tangible conversation on how you are diminishing your carbon footprint without compromising on creativity. And as Adhiraj said, imagine if a lot more people, a lot more designers started actually thinking about holographic designs, about not just about designers, but creators coming together in a virtual space. I mean, you think about fashion weeks in the world.
Yeah.
I've been to all the fashion weeks. I've been to Paris Fashion Week 3 times, 4 times because of the cruise collection and the autumn, winter, and the spring, summer collections. I cannot tell you, of course, it feeds in a lot of tourism money into cities, but the number of people traveling into the country, the number of shows, the volume of people that had to be led in, the kind of food that has to be consumed, the cars that have to ferry them around. It's an endless stream of excess. And of course, the environment is going to bear the burden of it. So I think when you look at that larger scale of that kind of excess, and then you sort of go micro into what Adhiraj and Roma worked towards, is a beautiful, like a microcosmic example of what it can be at a macro level.
Yeah.
And just to take up from that point, just one other point, is the thing that I love about that fact is that digital, if you have a physical fashion week, that experience is limited to the people that have the ability to be there, right? It's the people that are sitting to see the fashion week are interacting. But the minute you digitize a fashion week like Helsinki Fashion Week, that is democratized. That experience is given to anybody, whether you're the Queen of England, whether you're me, whether you're anybody, right? And the tools that have made that are democratized, where a company like Louis Vuitton can use the same software that I can use. And then that's, it levels the playing field of access, which is something that really, really interests me fundamentally.
Yeah. In fact, of course, my question was going to be that, the digital footprint and throw some light on carbon footprints of fashion weeks, which of course you all have touched. But tell me, are we being truly digitally sustainable right now?
Well, there is a digital footprint too, because, we have to use electricity. Electricity has carbon emissions.
Yes.
There is no doubt that the kind of carbon emissions that come from digital footprint right now is nothing close to fossil fuels, for instance, right? I mean, I have to get into numbers because this has suddenly become a thing, digital sustainability. It's really, and I didn't want to talk, put it in a bracket too quickly because, it becomes a catchword. Sustainability. Sustainability itself became such a catchword. No one in the world knew what the hell it was all about, and meant everything and nothing at the same time. So I'm very careful to talk about digital sustainability. What I do know as a layperson who relies on my laptop to do my work, to stream, to whatever I have to do, as we all do, I need to recognize that there are ways and means of making sure that I curtail, I understand my digital footprint. So I can go to a variety of websites to say, this is my day's work. This is how much I stream. This is the kind of work I do. I can put a figure to my footprint. And then you can find little incremental ways to make changes in your daily lives. You know, if you're watching, for instance, a song on YouTube, you could be listening to it downloaded as a song, not as a video. I mean, those little things, because that's your streaming pattern, right? So I have to say, I'm sure Adhiraj has got a lot to say about this, but for me right now, the digital footprint is very much about like first understanding how much the digital world is going to consume us because of COVID.
But I mean, there have been advantages. So let's say, you know, since work from home has been there in India since March, I mean, even though we are in an unlocking phase, but what has happened is the travel time of people has reduced. So, you know, all that is leading to lesser pollution. I mean, I'm not talking about the subject here, but overall, the way we all are doing things is completely changed. What are your thoughts, Adhiraj, on this?
So it's such a new field, right? This is the first virtual fashion show that's ever been done, right? And it's the first year that people are transitioning to it. So the data, like coming back to data, I'd looked for it and it's not cohesively unavailable. And how you equate the data to each other is also not, like, it's difficult. So that's what interested me a lot about Helsinki Fashion Week, because Evelyn Mora, the founder, she acknowledged this, and they're actually doing a study right now that is going to measure the impact of their virtual fashion show compared to their fashion show last year. And that's something that I feel is going to be a cohesive study within this field to kind of give a comparison, give data points. But from what I've seen, 2% of the world's the emissions come from the internet, right? The running of data centers, XYZ, that's 2%. But then I started thinking about the other 98%. Now, the 2% is the whole internet, right? This amazing connection we have as a species is 2%, right, of that energy, the other 98%. So that's what I'm really curious about, like even the trade-off that comes with digital fashion, assuming that you have to use energy regardless of anything, because we will consume, right? That's not going anywhere. Long story short, I'm looking forward to seeing what the data is going to show before I can speculate on it.
Yeah, make sure you share that with me.
And do tell us a bit about working with your CGI technology and challenges of working with CGI and its challenges and benefits.
Right. So CGI, I think the closest kind of art form that has used CGI that we've all familiar with is films, right? VFX and kind of like storytelling through the form of like visual effects. Now, I wanted to bring that to fashion because it was very fundamental. When we started, we didn't have a budget, we didn't have a lot of money, but we wanted to do this. And I did 3D, and for me, it was more philosophical, where I was like, okay, at the end of the day, people are probably going to see the content of Lota more than they're going to wear the shirt. You know, like most of the people aren't going to buy a shirt, but they're going to see the content, right? And the content is only going to live on Instagram. So it's a digital square. So for me, it was all about using CGI to kind of mimic reality and tell stories that you couldn't tell by physical production, because physically you have to create shoots, you have to get people involved, 150 teams. What do you do with the material after you use it, right? And again, at scale. So everything we've done in Lota, all our campaigns has been sitting in a room using CGI, which is Rajiv, you create a model, a CGI set, you create the set that they live in. You can, once you create all that, you can control every single variable. So then it just depends on what story you want to tell. So it's been really interesting, but at the same time, it's challenging, right? So some of the challenges that people think that because something's digital, it kind of just happens at a click of a button. But what I'm realizing is that there's so much handmade aspect to it. Like just because it's digital doesn't mean it's not handmade, right? Like sculpting, if I have to sculpt one of my characters, I start from a face and then I'm sculpting each part in. It's all theory, it's knowledge, skin textures, lighting, like there's so much theoretical. I'm a cinematographer, I'm a director, I'm like all of that, right? So it is challenging in that respect. But at the same time, like once you kind of optimize it for yourself and your brand and you find out where it can work for you, there's tremendous opportunities. Like, let me tell you.
Adhiraj, what I found really interesting while I was, I've started reading a lot on sort of augmented reality and virtual reality in fashion specifically, and how interesting that the gaming industry is so interested in fashion now.
Yes.
Because you already have your characters. Yes. Now you just slap on a Gucci on them.
Yes.
Or whichever brand you want, and hopefully that will translate to sales at some point, because it's entertainment that could lead to sales. So I find, and there are certain brands that are already engaging in making sure that certain popular characters in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever are wearing the right kind of sneakers or the right kind of clothes that are cool enough, and hopefully that will translate into sales.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting thought. In fact, they've even done it in a lot of films, and I've seen it in a lot of, especially South Korean and Chinese series or films.
I mean, K-pop and all, they're all based on, but these are human beings that are being styled by other human beings.
Yeah.
Here we're talking about CGI, which is like, and, augmented realities, which is pretty much, as you said,
and maybe we'll see some of...
on a computer.
And we'll see some of these engineering students come up with much more in the coming years. I don't know what reality will be. But Bandana, tell me something. What role has virtual reality, help us in deep diving into sustainability? What role do you see it in trend forecasting? If you can throw some light on that.
Different questions. So the first question, and maybe after that you go to Adhiraj and I'll go back to trend forecasting. Sure. So for me, what I found really, really interesting about virtual reality, not augmented reality, virtual. So, augmented reality, I don't have to tell anyone, it's digital layering in your own reality. And virtual reality is a completely different reality, right? You're creating a different world. So I love the work, and I'm sure, Adhiraj, you know this amazing virtual reality filmmaker, Chris Milk. Okay, so Chris Milk collaborated with the United Nations, and it was Samsung, and they created a film that was a VR film about the life of refugee children in Syria, and he made such a compelling VR film that when you wore the set, you were in their lives. This is not like watching a film. You're immersed
in them. You're immersed in that moment, right? You're immersed.
And what they noticed was that the campaign was, of course, to raise funds for the Syrian refugee kids. The campaign donations just shot up because people could for the first time, empathize with the problem. Yeah. So Chris Milk himself says that VR is the biggest tool of empathy because nothing can bring you closer. So when I talk about sustainability and VR, imagine if we could put a VR set and I walk into a landfill with millions and millions of plastic or clothes that have been thrown away, not worn once, but thrown away, and I'm standing in mountain tops of this waste. How can I not be a sustainability champion after that? Yeah. Indonesia, the most polluted river in the world is in Indonesia. It's called the Citarum River. And two of my friends who are activists, they just made canoes, like kayaks, out of thrown away plastic water bottles and sailed down the Citarum River. And they garnered so much social media attention because of the film that they are literally they're kayaking down like the most putrid river that's bobbing with plastic. And that's also coming from fashion factories in Java. Okay. And then they made such a huge impact that the president of Indonesia came and met them at the banks and committed that within 7 years, it would be the cleanest river in the world. And he has now harnessed the Indonesian army to help do the cleanup. Now that was just through a film. Yeah. Imagine when VR comes into it and you are the one standing atop that plastic kayak and sailing down that really vile river of pollution. It will change your life purpose, as it does for a lot of activists in this field.
Yeah.
I think VR has, and already like companies like Oculus, which is now owned by Facebook, they already have started putting VR filmmakers with NGOs so that they can come together to make these compelling stories that can engage us consumers and visitors, to change our ways, to donate, whatever it is. But I find it extremely fascinating and very powerful a tool.
What are your thoughts, Adhiraj, especially on augmented reality and VR, in environmental awareness and around fashion?
Absolutely. So exactly what Vandana said, it's this idea of immersing yourself. That's what VR does, is that you just put on a headset and you're there, right? But another step from that is that you can design experiences using digital forms to kind of tell more of that story. So say, for example, you're standing in front of a landfill. Now you can actually go back in time. Like you could generate that landfill, or you could remove that landfill using VFX techniques. Maybe go back in time, look at the environment as to what it was back in the 1960s using real data, right? All this data is available. So it's using these different tools to kind of like create these experiences that can actually impact people. And I see VR being a strong tool for that. AR is a bit different. AR, when I think about, it's bringing these things into your world. You could do that, but because it lacks the immersive nature that VR has, I feel that you can't have these total experiences. You could, as it gets better and better. Like for example, there's a Snapchat filter where you can be in your room and you can see like how much flooding is happening, or like even weather forecasts. Like they show like this is the wind that's happening, so you can generate these things. But coming to fashion, I feel AR has a huge scope in kind of seeing real-time fashion, right? Photographing things and documenting it in terms of like 3D forms in AR. Like what could you do with that? Like for us, we're trying to see if you can, so all this is made out of scrap, right? But if you photograph it and it turns into 3D using AI and AR, you could then create your Lota shirts in real life at a click of a button and just see clothes in front of you, right? You can have experiences embedded in your reality. You can have Rajiv be like a friend to you, right? He could be, if you're going through times, or a sustainability champion, or trigger points. So there's a lot of scope, and I hope that, like especially since this is for IIT, like I see, like India has so much unique value to offer, and I think for that to happen, the engineering and the creative and tech communities really need to come together and just really do something, because I think there's a lot that can be done.
And I also feel with like augmented reality, so far our fashion world, what we always professed and indoctrinated was see now, buy now. Okay. But with AI, it's try before you buy, right? So what happens is immediately we are hoping it means you just don't keep buying and buying and buying and wasting and wasting and wasting and disposing and disposing. So the idea that now you have AI capabilities to try before you make the decision, hopefully it actually cuts down on the kind of purchases that people make that result in waste.
Yeah.
So for me, every angle of technology or the capabilities that are being enhanced yearly, if not monthly at the rate we are going, is to see, does it benefit the sustainability agenda? And with augmented reality, because it's so much about the experience before you buy, whether it is, we have a saying in the fashion industry where now fashion stores have become like websites because of AI. Like you walk in and, I'm talking about more sort of affluent cities with, where things are more digitized than where we are. But in reality, it's not very far away from all the rich brands doing, or powerful brands doing the same thing, that you walk into the store and you're walking into a website. While when you go to a website, you feel like you're going into a brick and mortar store. So they have switched places. But the advantage, in my very frugal opinion, is that I hope that all this trial and virtual and augmented reality will allow us to make better purchases, value our money, value the processes, understand the supply chain, understand why things say they are cheap because
Yeah.
someone's paying for it somewhere. If
Yes.
it's going to cost you $2.99 for a t-shirt where the cotton comes from one country, it's beaten into yarn in another country, then shipped to another country to be cut, then goes to another country for a screen print to be made, and then you're paying $2.99 for that t-shirt. Someone's paying for it. And it's usually people from our part of the world.
Yes.
India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam. So I hope like this augmented reality will allow us to get into processes, trial and error without the cost to the environment. So hopefully we'll make better, more reasonable and mindful choices when we buy.
Yeah, and we've all been in lockdown, and I mean, when I speak to my young team, no one has really shopped now, even though you can shop online or the malls have opened. And I remember, Bandana, you talking about going on a fashion diet in one of your articles. So, it becomes like we all look at it, you could buy one piece, which is very, very, it doesn't necessarily need to be a particular piece where, the dues are not being given to people who actually work towards it, and overconsumption is reduced. And Adhiraj, please throw some light on blockchain fashion system, and what are designers doing to adapt themselves in India, and tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So blockchain is essentially a technology, right? And the idea is that if you're a product designer or you're a brand owner, your IP can be freezed in this public ledger for anyone to see. Right? It's a simple idea that once I put this packet of information, I say that I have transferred this thing to Bandana. Nobody can hack that. Nobody can change that. That's documented for life. Right? So it's this idea of when you put something out into the world is to create a digital footprint to document where that moves throughout the process. And that's really important for sustainability because it's important to be transparent, to be sustainable. Correct. It's very important because even if you want to kind of call out bigger companies, right? If you're a smaller company, you can be like, this, I can be completely transparent. This is where everything goes. And I can use a standardized tool called blockchain to prove that. Nor can I change it. But if I tell a bigger company to start do real sustainability and not greenwashing, then they'll have to put their money where their mouth is and document everything on a blockchain, which essentially everyone can see and you can't ever change. So it kind of puts attribution and your kind of like your reputation into this public ledger. Now, there are some Indian companies that are doing this. Textile Genesis, for example, they are really well known, and I'm actually really fascinated by what they're doing. Essentially, they want to digitize and have traceability of any textile asset, right? Whether it's fiber, yarn, fabric, or garments, and kind of like equate that into digital currency. And you create the system. And the question is that, why would you do this? Because some kind of like design houses do this, a lot of sustainable fashion brands. But the problem is that they have these RFID chips, or they have this kind of like stock codes, which kind of get lost over time and really doesn't do anything material. So blockchain kind of like offers this ability to standardize the transparent nature that sustainability seeks and kind of like have that permanently for the future, for future generations, and to kind of like see accurate data right now.
And Bandana, like, tell us a bit about your handmade products, artisans, and where technology can play a role in the fashion and design industry.
Right. So, part of my passion, talking about sustainability, because of where I come from. I'm Nepali from India, living in Indonesia. We have a very shared history of handmade culture. So I talk a lot about cultural sustainability, where we understand that we are rural economies predominantly, and that we are grassroots economies. And so therefore I talk a lot about the Gandhian philosophy that believes in the village units, that he himself wanted to be treated as republics, as village republics, as he called it, because the strength of India before colonization lay in the fact that at the grassroots level, it was very strong, powerful in the way they made and created within their own unit villages, right? So every village would have a craftsperson, dyer, cobbler, embroiderer, you name it. These were like ecosystems that existed and fed a very, very healthy country. And then, of course, with British colonization, that's the very thing that they nipped in the bottom. And that's how countries collapse. And so for me, cultural sustainability is a big part of my conversation. And that involves made by hand, and especially handlooms and the textile industry and the handicraft industry. But here is what I find really, really shocking. And I'm not saying I have the answer, because I'm just a lone activist sitting in a jungle. The soft powers of India, okay? One is technology, one is textiles. I just find it fascinating that the two haven't met yet in a way that can change the industry. Now, I know that there's certain websites that, the forefront of encouraging and promoting handicrafts from all over India. They're trying to sort of digitally map the sources of handicrafts all over the country. But I think that's a mapping issue. You're talking about where the NGOs, where the village clusters, where the artisanal clusters, this region makes this kind of fabric, that region, that's mapping. Now, what with that? Where does technology come in? I mean, I do a lot of work in I've been part of Global Change Award in Stockholm, that we give a lot of money to innovators who come up with incredible sustainable fabrics and sustainable practices in fashion. That's why today we know about pineapple cloth, we know about silks made from crop waste, we know vegan leather that comes out from grape wine waste, cloth being made out of algae and mushrooms, unbelievable stuff. I just feel India somewhere has really lagged behind for all the talk that we have all over the world about Indian artisanship. India contributes 2% to a $400 billion craft industry of the world. We are only 2%. Can you imagine? And this is a country of our size with a heritage and artistic So till technology, and to all the IITians who are listening, till technology cracks this, how do we engage? This crafts, the crafts people, the crafts industry is the second largest hirer in the country. It's the biggest job market after agriculture.
Yeah.
And yet we have not been able to crack it. So I have no answers, but I'm really curious for all the technocrats and all these amazing men and women who are going to come out of great institutions of technology. I hope you will address this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting point, Bandana, which you've made, especially of the soft powers of us being, technocrats, producing so many technocrats as well as having so many artisans. And if both of them merge, I don't know, I'm sure our percentage will really rise in terms of the billions of dollar industry. So Adhiraj, tell us a bit about, the new technology innovations and how can they benefit our process and systems in the supply chain of technology. I want you to throw some light on that.
Okay, so I'll give you an example of Roma, right? She has a supply chain, she makes these goods, and basically what we realized is that the iterative process, there's so much value in the iterative process. So for example, even when I was listening to Helsinki Fashion Week, they had these talks with all these other designers and the 3D designers. And there was a singular kind of theme that ran through all of them, where the traditional designers were shocked that when they created this photorealistic shirt or garment, that to change the color was just a click of a button, right? You change it from red, you change it from blue, you can change the kind of the buttons. And if you were to do that in real life, you'd have to die, right? You'd have to do these physical processes to execute that. So from what I see from a supply chain thing is that most of the designers are traditional and they're starting to think more in 3D. By collaborating with 3D designers, they're finding out how they can leverage their existing model and use 3D design or digital forms or AI, anything, to optimize their entire process, whether it's visual communications, just trying to like sell their product, or whether it's creating different parts of that creation process, right? And I think that's where the value really is that digital fashion has these tools that are evolving on a daily basis, updates, and everything keeps changing. And for a supply side of it, independent designers, big corporations really need to introspect as to what their model is and what these resources can offer them to optimize their own workflows. There is a lot of onus on that. And that's something I realized coming out of this like Helsinki Fashion Week and working with Roma, is that there is this new way forward, but it's not a one size fits all. It's about really being mindful as to where your most waste is, how can you optimize your current process, and how do you mindfully go about doing that. I think that's the way forward for a lot of designers.
So, I mean, we realize, especially during lockdown, I mean, I personally realized that even like the Women Inspiring Network took shape, and we've collaborated with many people in our journey. We've now collaborated with IIT last week, which we did with Jai Hind. Our first webinar was again a collaboration. And, with collaborations and partnerships, whether it's been Inox for the film series or Businessworld or any other, we've actually managed to reach a scale of 10 million reach in a short span of 4 months. And I really wanted to know your thoughts on post-COVID. How do we see collaborations for the fashion industry, Bandana?
Well, in my opinion, the big winners, if we look at winning from a different point of view, as not just about being about money and success, but smaller brands that have complete control over the supply chain. They know that they can invest in technology. They know that they can make changes into a digital, move from very offline to online into the digital space, experiment with AI, use the data that is there for everyone to use to make better choices about customers and products that you have to make. I think the smaller brands that are tightly controlled have great possibilities. But ideologically and philosophically, you have to believe that bigger is not better.
Yes.
It's about being authentic at every stage of your business practice. Here we are talking about fashion, but it very much applies to anything that you could be doing in your life. So I feel very optimistic for younger brands that will show the resilience because they're probably millennials, they're good with technology, they dive into it, they already have a collective of their own, their tribe, that share the same ethics as the creator and the consumer. And so I feel they are ripe for making these big shifts. But when I see big fast fashion brands and these mammoth countries that are opening one store per second all over the world, that kind of scale, it frightens me. They have to make such dramatic changes to have better practices in their system. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Adhiraj, what do you think? I mean, of course, you mentioned that how you collaborated with Roma, but any other thoughts in terms of collaborations?
Right. I could not stress more on how collaboration is so important going in the future, especially for individuals and starting out and small companies. Like, there is so much value to be gained. Speaking just within fashion, we have a history of textiles, this amazing heritage. We have some of the best technology talent. We have the best engineering talent. And we have some very, very creative people in the community. Problem that I see is that I'm a cross-pollinator through and through. Lota was started, I had no idea about fashion. I met a knitwear designer, understood this whole world, but I brought my own spin to it, right? Which is technology, which is CGI models. And I think that at the core of it, collaborating across cross-pollinating within different fields brings new value at the end of the day. And it's unique value. And I think as we have so much heritage to draw from, I think thinking creatively post the pandemic world, or even currently in the pandemic world, has only been accelerated. And I couldn't advocate it more. Like, just somebody that you have no idea about their profession, but they're really good at what they do, you're really good at what they do, and just trying to find a symbiosis or a problem to solve and just execute on that. Like, I couldn't stress on that anymore. Like, it's definitely worth the exploration.
And if I can add to this, what I find fascinating, as this is pre-COVID, when I was traveling all over the world, giving talks on sustainability and talking about Gandhian principles and ideology and what have you, and finding myself in Scandinavian countries that are at the forefront of innovation, right? Of course, they are very, very affluent, small population countries, so everything's in control and they're great innovators. My whole life changed from being called the fashionista who has to go in heels and look the part, walk the part, and all that nonsense, going into conferences where the new world for fashion was defined by cross-pollinators, that designers were collaborating with biochemical engineers, with textile developers, with startups from Silicon Valley, from food waste managers in Italy, and they were collaborating and then coming up with a solution, because someone can think of waste to wealth. You know, someone can think about technology or how you can convert that mushroom into a silky fiber, but working with a designer. It was unbelievable. It was full of geeks, and that was my little paradise.
Wow.
You know, it changed the whole landscape, even visually, of what fashion was all about. It, in fact, now when I think about what fashion it was, or if it continues to be that way, it's regressive. You know, fashion has to solve world problems. Fashion has to solve clothing waste. It has to look after our bodies as acts of mindfulness. It has to think about the Bangladeshi factory workers who are living in penury now because a handful of very rich Western brands decided not to honor their contracts during COVID. So what you wear on your back, you have to be beholden to a moral compass. And so fashion for fashion's sake, if it just exists, beauty for beauty's sake, then I certainly don't personally prescribe to it. And so for me, this cross-pollination has to happen to affect change. It has to be about social change. Of course, we want beauty, but we want social change. We want equality. I think that's very important to understand.
And our last question, your last thoughts on a winning message for our aspiring students.
Bandana, do you want to go for it?
Go on, Adhiraj.
Okay, go.
Adhiraj, you started in Bandana.
So there's no getting around that there is a pandemic happening. It is a very tough time, right? However, I think I genuinely do believe there's a lot of opportunity. Like India, we're the second biggest country, right? We have amazing talent. There is the democratization of technology is happening right now. You can access anything. You can send anybody an email. Like, we have to find out what this new value is in this world, like our values, what we want to do, like how we want to contribute to the future. And you can do it. Like, there is opportunity. Like, having this pessimistic post like is not going to do anybody any favors. So I think everything we've talked about, like just diving deep into it, there is value there. There is opportunity there. Like, think creativity, think out of the box, try new tools, get experimental, talk to people outside your bubble. It's worth the exploration. Like, it's worked for me, and I'm having a great time, and I recommend it, definitely.
Bandana?
My last words. I get super excited about technology. I'm not as proficient as Adhiraj is, but I love the larger picture. I love it. But here's my appeal. Like, it's so wonderful to be catapulted. You know, we are going to move so fast into a bigger, brighter world where technology is going to play such a big part. But I think we should always remind ourselves that we are humans, and we can never forget the humanity in us. And so the machines should always be our tools, and we shouldn't be the tools of the machines. And I know it's very George Orwellian in its forecasting, but look where we come from. I mean, you know, we're all from India, and here in Bali, people from all over the world come here. Why? Because they come here for Ayurveda, for yoga, for Vedanta, and I'm talking about very secularly. This is not a religious prophecy I'm trying to make. I'm talking about secular ideas of good living, of compassionate living. So I think with all this talk about technology and innovation, we cannot forget our humanity and our compassion.
Thank you so much, Bandana and Adhiraj, for inspiring us. And, I really enjoyed the discussion on fashion tech and especially sustainability, which is so very relevant in today's time. Bandana, I've been wanting to do the sustainability series for quite some time, and I first chatted with you virtually in April. And I'm so glad we were able to put this together for IIT. And for all of you watching us, please do follow us on the Women Inspiring Network. It's an inspirational storytelling platform which creates, shares, informs, and inspires. It's actually a movement to pay it forward. And if in some little way we can create some impact or change the lives of people around us, that would be really, really great. Thank you once again for inspiring us, and thank you for joining us.